Hi, this is Jeff from the Ozark Mountains in Missouri, USA. Today, we're going to look at this very dilapidated box, which houses an Odyssey 300. I was traveling out of town to pick up some Commodore gear that I bought, and when I couldn't find the place I was looking for, I happened to stop at this humongous antiques mall to get directions. And found out I was right beside the place I was looking for, but while I was there, what the heck, I thought I'd look around, and I found this box. It wasn't too expensive, so I thought I'll get it, especially after I looked inside and found out there was not one, but two Odyssey 300s in here. Here's the lid itself, and as you can see, the corners are all ripped. It's pretty dilapidated and it's dirty, but it's still there. So I'll see if we can find a way to kind of fix this up a little bit. And here is the box, the bottom part of the box that is. And you'll notice right here, no, that is not poo. That is part of a mud dauber's nest, which you can see from up here. We have a type of wasp here in Missouri and a lot of the parts in the Midwestern United States. That's called a mud dauber or dirt dauber. And it picks up little bits of mud and makes nests which have little tunnels that they live in. And they get into everything. If it's stored in an area that the wasp can get into, they will get in there. So there might even be some inside the consoles. And no doubt you're looking at this very yellow color thinking, oh my gosh, has this been in the sun its entire life? And even the bottom one is that color, but believe it or not, Magnavox made them this color. So I think the first thing I'm going to do here is get the second one out of the box, take the box out to the garage, get the dirt out of it, and then we'll open these up and have a look inside and see if the dirt daubers got in there too. When folks think about home video game consoles, the first thing that often comes to mind is the Atari 2600. Well, they existed several years before Atari. Way back in 1966, Ralph H. Baer had the idea for a box that could be connected to a television set to play games. Mr. Baer first worked on it in secret with one of his technicians, and only after some success was it demonstrated to his boss at Sanders, a military contractor. Eventually, Sanders sold the product to Magnavox in January 1971. Magnavox in turn marketed it as the Odyssey starting in 1972 in May, predating the Atari Pong by several months. Between 1975 and 1977, Magnavox released the 100 to 500 series of consoles. These all used the same basic molded plastic enclosure with differences in color and ornamentation. The Odyssey 100 was a multi-chip design from Magnavox, while the Model 200 was a single-chip design using a TI game system on a chip. Both used manual game scoring by way of sliders on the console. By the time 1976 rolled around, there was more competition and lower-priced products. Magnavox brought out the Model 300 based on the General Instruments AY-3-8500 video game on a chip. Many consoles at this time used the same chip, and all the games were a variation of Pong. This was the first console that Magnavox released with electronic scoring. The models 400 and 500 were updated versions of the 200, which added things like on-screen scoring, and the 500 even output a color display. Okay, got the majority of the dirt cleaned out of the box, and while doing so I noticed a couple interesting things. One is this label here, which is upside down. You can see that it says it's a Magnavox picture tube repair label, which is kind of interesting. So it makes me wonder if this had been in a repair shop at some time. I don't know. The other thing was Magnavox Parts Division little flyer for the accessories they offered back in the day, complete with the price list. If anybody's interested in that and it's not already available online, I will scan it for you. Okay, so here is our Magnavox Odyssey 300. Now it's a two-player console. The only control each player has is this potentiometer right here. And there are 3 switches. I have a game switch to set it to one of 3 games, a skill switch to set it to 1 to 3 skill levels, and a on-off power and reset switch. And all of these feel like they have a lot of dirt in them. And I think before we turn this over, I'm going to try to pull these knobs off here. Luckily, they're not too hard to get off. Oh, goodness. I spoke too soon. This one is very difficult. Oh. Okay. So we got those off of there. And you can see some of the remaining goodies that the dirt daubers left us. And this says covered by one or more of the following patents and made in the USA. Quarter of a turn there. And the bottom cover comes off. Well, that's not too bad, is it? Other than the dirt dauber mess on the bottom. And the battery compartment is nice and clean. Just have a single board, a speaker. I guess there is this little carrier board here. Uh-oh, some damage. This is the board for the external power, and it has a broken post. Maybe we need to take this battery compartment out to get this bracket loose to get the circuit board off. This here is like an extra large 9-volt battery connector. Okay, so we've got that off there. And we've got this metal bit here, which has some nice sharp edges. And our board. And there's some type of screw sticking out the back here from the modulator. That's kind of weird. Oh man. Just kind of moving these back and forth to try to get them loosened up. I'll lift that off of there. Get you a look inside there. It has some of those speed clips here that hold these parts on, so for cleaning these guys up that might be important. And it's also interesting to note that these black plastic shields are trapped under this label here, so that's going to be interesting to try to clean that up. Okay, there's not a lot to the inside of one of these. We've got our 2 potentiometers, the 3 switches from the front panel, 3 capacitors, a handful of discrete components, and 1 IC, which is an AY-3-8500-1. The AY-3-8500 was the first in a series of Pong on a chip ICs from General Instruments. It could play 6 variations of Pong and had a black and white output which could drive an RF modulator, and it also had a simple beep-boop type sound output. It was possible to colorize the video output by adding an additional chip, the AY-3-8515. PAL and NTSC versions were available, and the chip featured separate video output for the players, score, and ball so they could be mixed to provide different luminance for each type of object. Magnavox chose not to use all the functionality of this chip in this design, and some of the pins marked as not connected on this diagram were used in later chip models. See these two components right here? It looks like a resistor and a diode, maybe. Yeah, a resistor and a Zener diode that have been tied together. That looks like that was a factory botch, because on the silk screen it shows Z1, which I guess would be. Kind of looking at what this screw sticking out of the modulator is for, and my only guess is that it's for some type of fine tuning, and they stuck it out like that so a technician could get to it with the board mounted. This part, what we should do to start with is clean the pots and the switches so those are flowing good, and see what happens. Oh, check the caps. Okay, first things first, let's clean these pots. Okay, I've got my little squirt can of deoxit here and a rag set to catch any mess. I'm going to squirt in here. Let's squirt some of that in there. A nice twist. Oh, wow. There is a lot of junk that came out of there. Well, that was flowing out of there pretty clean now. Oh, goodness. Same type of way. Yep. A lot of junk in there. Now I'm going to squirt some cleaner in these switches. Try to get a little in here on this channel selector too. Dry out a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and squirt a little contact cleaner in our power switch here too, or power connector rather. Okay. I've got my little cheapy component tester here. Now, no, this is not the most accurate thing in the world, but that's okay. I'm not trying to get a quantitative measurement here. I'm not trying to find out exactly what the capacitance is or exactly what the ESR is. I'm just trying to get a sense of if it's probably good or if it's probably bad. And these little things are, typically accurate enough for that type of measurement. Yeah, 0.11 ohms. It's measuring at high. 525 microfarad, that's fine. These capacitors are going to be 20 or 30%. So, here's one of the others. About 540, less than 0.2 ohms ESR, that's fine. And yeah, about the same. Okay, so these are good enough for at least testing. I'm not going to be overly worried about replacing them. They're a good brand. They haven't been, overused. They weren't in a very hot environment. And even though they're, 40 years old now, I'm sure they're just fine. Got you on a close-up of one of the potentiometer. You can kind of see it there. You can see we've got the start of a cold solder joint there. Here's one of the switches, and you can see we've got the same thing here. Some of the other switches don't look too swift. So what I'm going to do is go and touch up all the solder joints for the switches, the things people have been manhandling, and make sure we've got good solder connections to start with. Okie doke. So I'm going to put a little bit of my paste flux on these connections. Got this from Jameco, I think. This has worked out pretty good. This just helped clean the joint as it warms up, and it really improves the quality of your soldering and desoldering, especially on this old equipment. The other thing I've noticed looking at this board is how they haven't trimmed a lot of the really long leads on things, which is kind of astounding. I imagine a lot of this stuff was still hand inserted before it went through the wave soldering machine, and it wasn't a requirement, and maybe the long leads kept the parts from bouncing out of the circuit board, which is always a concern when you're hand inserting parts. And you notice we're doing a fair bit of work here just to get prepared to power it on. That's okay. We want to make sure that it's safe. We're not going to damage it, that type of thing. We're just kind of looking at these very common things that you might find in an old piece of gear. Adding a little fresh solder to the joints. I don't know how well you can see the flux smoking there. And you notice I'm holding my iron on here for a while. That is perfectly fine. You've got to give everything time enough to heat up. And these things with bigger pads are going to take longer to heat up. If you have a temperature controlled iron, you have a lot less risk of overheating the pad. Got the touch-up soldering done on the backhand side. And I took my multimeter and measured the pots like this, just to make sure they were okay. And they move smooth. The resistance changes. They say they are 500K pots, and they measure about that, so it should be fine. I'm going to figure out how to hook up power to this safely. We'll hook up the bench power supply, and I think even without this connected to the TV, we should be able to hear it beep when it's turned on, which would be a really good indication. Another thing I did was to take a look at how this battery connector plugged into the battery holder, confirm that the spring here was on the negative side of things, and then measured from here to where it's marked battery ground on the board to confirm that this is the negative contact and this is the positive contact. Now that's the way it should be, but I'm not always willing to believe it, so it's best to check it before you blow something up. I marked this plus and minus on here so I didn't get it mixed up. If I had a whole drawer full of C batteries, I would use that, but I don't. Okay, and I'll try turning it on, and hopefully this will beep. Oh, awesome. No idea if it's outputting a picture, but at least the chip's running because it's beeping. It sounds like Pong, doesn't it? Well, it's generic Magnavox Pong, but okay. Okay, so now we know the board works, which is super freaking awesome. I'm going to work on taking a bit of coax and an F connector, and this coaxial power cable right here, and trying to make an adapter to hook to my TV there up in the corner. And so hopefully in a few minutes we'll see if it works. Be right back. Okay, one craptastic coax adapter later. It's going to be hard for you to see right here from the screen, but it has a lot of snow on it, and that's because I literally made a baling wire and chewing gum type of adapter just to hold the silly coax connector to a piece of regular coax, which wasn't very good either. But at any rate, you can see that it does indeed move. I'm not sure how you go about starting a game. Oh. Ah, there's the other player. Okay. Oh. Huh. Whoa, Nelly. That just serves right off the bat. Okay. So, I guess now we know the circuit works and our controls work. We need to give this thing a serious bath and change the connector on the coax cable to something that's actually useful, and maybe look at doing a composite mod on this if that's possible. How fun. I wanted to give you a quick peek at how I rigged up this funky RF connector. This is some regular RG6U coax, and I bent the center conductor in kind of an S shape so it would sort of fit on the inside there, and then I wrapped the braid around the barrel with some copper wire. So what I'm going to do, since it's a very odd connector that nobody uses anymore, is I will cut that off of there and replace it with a regular RCA connector, which was used on about every other type of home console for the RF output. And then it will just take an RCA to F-type connector to hook it to the TV. Now this is RCA to BNC, BNC to F-type, but I've got some that just go directly from RCA to F-type, or an order that should be here by next week. So that'll take care of the RF connection to the TV. And I gave the plastic bits a good scrub tonight. I took the speed nuts loose from the back of these guys where they were held onto there. Gave that a good scrub in the sink, and it seems like that the little plastic slidey bits that are under that sticker have freed up enough they'll be okay. Got rid of the dirt dauber vestiges that are on that bottom cover. So I will let these dry overnight and give them a coat of some 303 protectant, which is something I use on my truck. And then I guess we'll reassemble this and play some games. Now I need to fix this broken mounting post, which is for the external power board. The broken off piece here was cracked down the sides you see there, so I dribbled some acetone in there and squeezed it in and out so it would solidify in the crack. And then I machined a bushing similar to what I've done for the Commodore 64 case saver kits. And the bushing will slip down over here, and this will drop down in there, and that'll epoxy in there just like that. This really doesn't need to have this large of a wall thickness. Given the height though, this is about 1.15 inches, which is 29 millimeters. The inside diameter is about 0.385 inches, which is what, 10 millimeters? And that just slips down over there enough to go over the crack. So I'm going to take some of my favorite DevCon plastic welder, which works great on plastic. It's the stinkiest stuff in the world though. Mix some of this up, glue that together, and then by tomorrow morning we'll be all set. That's way more than I need, but if you don't get enough, it doesn't set up correctly. Okay, first we'll put a little on there. Set that guy in place. I'm going to smear some epoxy around the outside of this, which should be more than enough to fill in the void between the sleeve and the original post. Okay, and that squished out nicely around the bottom. The back cover in general cleaned up really well, but there was this streak, which you can see just right there. Tilt that so you can see it better. And it didn't look like it was melted. It looked like something was on it, but I couldn't figure out what. I tried wiping it down with some WD-40 and got just a little bit of stuff off there. And then I tried .3 brake fluid and got that. So I'm wondering if this is paint. .3 brake fluid, that's what you use in your car. It has an interesting property that it is safe on plastic, but it will soften paint pretty well. So if you get paint on plastic, if you can soak it in a little .3 brake fluid, it'll normally strip it right off there. There's a sticker right here that I've covered in painter's tape because I wanted to try to save it. So I guess what is left is to put this guy back together. I've got the parts cleaned up and I set out these corner pieces on the proper sides. These are marked right hand and left hand. This is the right hand, but since I'm looking at this from the bottom, it's on the left hand, if that makes sense. I flattened the little speed nuts or clips back out. You might just be able to see what that looks like there. To get these off, you need to pry up under these ears very carefully with a small screwdriver, and then take a pair of needle nose pliers and squish them back down just a little bit to put them back on. That'll work out just fine. So I'll slip this one back in here. I'll slip a couple of these guys down on there. There we go. Now we can take our cleaned up circuit board. Kind of oriented the right direction. We've got all our little slidey doos down here. Get these in a known spot for the switches to go through. There we go. That was kind of tricky. So we get our fasteners here, and remember, backwards until it drops in, and then forwards. RF cord back around there like it was. Okay. There. Now drop that was on that side. Okay, I found this easier to go ahead and start the screws in these little holes before setting it down in here. Okie dokie. Now we've got unit number 1, which was the dirtiest by far, all back together and polished up and fully functional, and I hope you'll agree it was quite a transformation. Went from a mud dauber's nest to really looking nice and working well. Let's take a look at unit number 2 now. Here is a bit of shaky cam footage of the second unit. You can see we have some rusty looking spots here on the inside of the bottom cover. And it doesn't look too bad, but the batteries were left in it. Soldering looks better on this unit, but there might still be some cracks around the pots there. Refurbishing this second unit was basically a carbon copy of the first. Touched up the solder joints on the board, cleaned the pots and switches, replaced the RF connector with a standard RCA connector, and I also had to replace the battery holder. This is just a standard 6 C-cell battery holder I bought from eBay. I drilled a couple holes to match the original holes. This one used a standard size 9-volt battery connector rather than the wider one of the original, so I had to swap out the battery connector for standard size 9-volt battery connector. and it works quite nicely. I also found a 9-volt DC wall wart in my box of old wall warts, and I added a 2.5 millimeter monophone plug, which is also 3/32 in imperial measurements, which fits the connector here. And by doing this, I found out that the problem I had with all the snow on the screen before was actually caused by my bench power supply. I had to use my switching bench power supply, which has a quite noisy output, and that was causing a lot of artifacts on the screen. And this little power supply was a lot better for this purpose. And it actually produced a really nice picture. And given the low resolution of the image and the fact that it's in black and white, etc., I don't see the point of doing a composite model on this, because you're not going to improve the picture quality significantly. And it works just fine just as it is right now. Also, I mentioned using this before. This is 303 aerospace protectant. I use this on the bed cover on my truck. It's what the cover manufacturers recommended. I've used this for years, and it's kept it in really good shape. It works really good on plastic in general, and it really brought back the shine to the plastic. Oh, hey. Huh. I know what that glue spot is on the other one. That's where that label was glued on. So here I've been worried about getting that spot off of there, and it was on there from the factory. How about that? And here is what the second unit looks like after it's all cleaned up and refurbished. This one came out really great. It looks just about as good as new, and it also happens to be the one with the serial number tag still on the back of it that matches the box. You might also remember how dilapidated this box lid was, and now it's actually a functional lid. What I did was cut some strips out of poster board and glue into the inside rim of the box to reinforce the corners. And I went around the box every place there was a tear and carefully dabbed some glue into those sections and clamped it back together. And that worked quite nicely. Now, this box is by no means perfect, but it's actually usable as a box now. And especially this corner, it was really torn up before. It was kind of crinkled, and it looks a lot nicer now. Still not perfect, but usable. This is the type of glue I use. This is supposed to be good for repairing books and things like that, so I thought it would be good for this cardboard, and it tended to do the job. And I just used a little paintbrush like so to dab the glue in where it needed to go. Well, I hope you've enjoyed these episodes. It was an interesting challenge to take these two Odysseys, which have been stored in a barn or shed for years, gotten really dirty, got some mud dauber's nest in there, and to clean all that up and get them nursed back to health. I'm really happy and surprised that they both work perfectly after 44 years. The first unit we took a look at here does have a little fading on it in various spots, but it works perfectly. The second unit, which matches the serial number on the box, looks very nice. I would say it looks nearly new. And aside from not having the original RF switch box and external power supply, it has everything it came with, including the optional accessory guide. Say, if you're not already a subscriber, what are you waiting for? If you look down below, you'll see a rectangular subscribe box. Just click on that, dude, and you'll be subscribed. And then you'll notice the bell-shaped icon. And if you click on that, YouTube will be kind enough to let you know just as soon as I post a new video. That really helps out a lot. If you'd like to support this channel, look down below in the description and you'll see links for my Patreon and Subscribestar accounts. If you have any questions or comments, just let me know in the comments section down below. I would love to hear from you. Well, until next time, bye.